Hey everyone, this is Caitlin Leopold, your registered dietitian. And today I wanted to definitely talk about protein as we talked about kind of carbs in one of our last presentations. So today I definitely wanted to talk about the importance of protein and why we kind of need this macronutrient. So what is protein? So, right, just a reminder, we talked a little bit about macronutrients in the last one. But macronutrients make up the big picture in our body, and they are the nutrients essentially that our body needs in larger quantities. So protein in particular provides 4 calories per gram, actually, just like our carbohydrates do. So again, if you look at a food label, an example, if it just has like 12 grams, you times that by 4, you can actually see how many calories are provided from your protein. Proteins are long chains, essentially, of amino acids that form all the basis of life. So our body actually consists of around 100 trillion cells, and each cell has different proteins. So proteins are essential in a way, if you think like tiny machines inside the cell that help get certain jobs in our body done. So that's kind of what protein does. Essentially, it's little machines in our cells that kind of help get everything done in our body. So as you can see together, they help each cell do its job. And they're both found in plants and animals. And the way to kind of think of protein is it's a building block of our body. So our body needs protein for growth and development, to make new cells, and definitely repair the damaged and tissue cells. So again, a little bit more in depth, but what does protein do? So this one, the first one, right, being the most common one that we all know, is definitely to build and maintain our bones, muscles, and skin. So muscle, as we all know, is mainly made up of our protein. Protein also helps repair cells and body tissues. It also helps to heal wounds, promote growth, especially in our muscles, maintain healthy organs, and it is important for even many more body processes such as blood clotting, fluid balance, immune response, vision, and production of hormones and enzymes. So amino acids and protein. So just like protein is a building block of our body, amino acids are actually the building blocks of protein. So as you can see, there are 20 different amino acids that the body uses to synthesize our proteins. I'm not going to go through all of those, but there is the list of all 20 of them. And there are essentially broken down to essential amino acids, which are required for normal body function, and they actually cannot be made by the body, so we must obtain them from food. And then non-essential can be made by the body, but typically, sometimes not enough in times of need. So there are 9 that are considered essential and 11 that are non-essential. So again, we do need both. But essential, we do need to consume them from food, and non-essential, our body can make in certain times from breaking down certain proteins. So that is further broken down into complete proteins and incomplete proteins. So complete proteins are protein sources that contain all of your essential amino acids in adequate amounts. So again, as I said, there's 20 amino acids, okay? And the complete proteins typically have all of our essential when we just consume it regularly. So we get complete proteins from our animal sources. So I mean our typical meats, even your steak, your fish, your chicken, so all animal proteins there. Quinoa is a grain, but it actually, I always kind of call it my super grain because it contains all of your essential amino acids, and then also soy does as well. And then your incomplete proteins is a protein source that's missing or lacking in one or more of the essential amino acids. So this is typically from your plant sources. And again, not one's considered better than the other. We do need to kind of consume both in a healthy diet. So a complementary protein is typically 2 or more incomplete protein sources that when eaten at the same time can actually compensate for each other's lack of amino acids. So our body's pretty cool in that way. So like, right, if I consume 2 incomplete proteins, my body can actually kind of mesh them together, and then it will form a complete protein in a sense. So again, both are kind of essential. I typically kind of aim for more complete proteins, but when you definitely do have that incomplete, you kind of want to have another one to compensate for the amino acids. So examples, right, is grains, which are actually low in a certain amino acid called lysine, and beans and nuts are low in an amino acid called methionine. So when grains and legumes are consumed together, so example, even just rice and beans, or even like peanut butter, which right would be our nuts, and even whole grain bread, right? Those two together kind of form that complete protein. So again, you can have either one, but it's kind of always combining them together would you maximize your total benefits from them. Where is protein found? So we do find protein definitely in our beans and peas. Not a super duper high amount, but definitely there's protein in there. Dairy products, so whether that be yogurt, cow's milk in particularly versus your nut alternative milks, and then eggs. Typically, depending on your situation and heart-related conditions, I typically advocate the whole egg, for reason being you do get more protein from consuming both together. Meat and poultry are nuts and seeds, same thing. It doesn't consume a lot of protein, and we typically do need to watch our portions with that. And then seafood, and then also your soy products such as tofu or even tempeh is where you get some of your soy protein there. So us being in a gym setting, I definitely wanted to talk about today why it's definitely important to consume protein, especially when we're active and physically pushing a lot of weight in the gym. So this slide, I'm going to kind of talk about what happens, and then actually on the next slide, if you're like me and you're a visual learner, I actually kind of break it down in a picture form. So when we lift weights, and as well as even other strenuous exercise, we actually kind of cause very small tears in our muscle tissue. And this damage, I mean, as it kind of doesn't sound very good, but it's actually key component of muscle development, because what happens when those tears happen, it actually triggers a healing process, and our body tries to adapt itself and prevent this damage from happening in the future. So our body, this is the third one down here, contains specialized cells, also known as satellite cells, that actually begin fusing with our muscle fibers to essentially increase the thickness. So these fused cells kind of transition into a new protein strands within the fibers, and they actually are used again to create additional strands. So this in turn can help increase both the size and the strength of our muscle fibers, resulting in that increase of muscle mass and muscular strength that we want when we lift weights regularly. So again, what happens when we lift? We create small tears on our muscles, and our specialized cells come in and essentially repair and build up those cells, which in turn can kind of increase the size and strength. So if we don't consume adequate protein, right, they definitely can't do that. So that's why it's definitely important to make sure we consume proper protein to kind of help build up those cells. So again, as I said, I just briefly kind of talked about it in the last slide, and this breaks it down a little bit further in picture form. So as you can see by the first one, that's just your normal muscle cell. And as you can see in the middle one, that's a small tear, and those green cells there are those satellite cells. So as you can see, they're kind of coming in and repairing and building up. And then on the last one, as you can see, there's a lot more muscle fibers there, and it's kind of fused together again. So that's essentially kind of what happens when we build and push those muscles in the gym. So again, protein after exercise. So as you can see, it's definitely important to get proper amounts of protein, because if I consistently did not, I'm not going to have enough to repair and actually build those muscle cells up. So again, you're kind of working and not being able to repair for not fueling properly after exercise. So to maximize proper muscle growth induced by training, we definitely need to make sure our protein is there, because as you can see, it's definitely fundamental to help, excuse me, help the repair, remodeling, and that growth of that muscle tissue. So timing of the protein as well, I definitely wanted to talk about, because as you can see, consuming protein after exercise also helps stimulate that muscle synthesis, inhibit that protein breakdown, and definitely enhance building up that muscle. So typically, you kind of might have heard this before, but you might have heard that we need to, consume protein right after exercise, and that's not necessarily actually the case. More and more research is kind of coming out that's showing the window of anabolic opportunity is actually greater than we believe. So it's not just a few hours after exercise, it's actually the big picture. So it's how much protein we're actually consuming in a 24-hour period than just that window right after exercise. So you don't necessarily have to come home, right, and chug a protein shake. I mean, you totally could if you really wanted to, but typically I kind of say I definitely wanted you to take the time after your exercise to prepare a well-balanced meal that definitely includes, high quality protein, rather just focusing on, hey, I need to get protein as soon as I possibly can. So again, we don't necessarily have to consume it like immediately after, but it's more about consuming the proper amounts in that 24-hour period. That makes a bigger difference than just right after exercise. So another thing I wanted to talk about is something called sarcopenia. So this kind of happens as we age, and again has a definitely important part in our muscles and our protein. So as we age, it's just a natural occurring thing that happens. It's the progressive loss of muscle mass, even function, quality, and strength. It's driven by the aging process. So again, this can be a natural thing that happens, especially if we're not in here building strength and pushing weights in the gym. We actually start to lose small amounts of muscle mass each year. So as you can see by that next bullet point, it actually can start at age 25. And again, this is if we're not even active in the gym, not pushing a lot of weights, but it can start at 25, a little bit more heightened around the age of 40, and definitely more extreme by mid 70s, okay? So again, this is just a natural occurring thing, especially if we're sedentary, that begins to happen. So the rate of muscle protein synthesis definitely decreases with aging, as well as the body's ability to convert amino acids. So a few things that typically happen when we age, right? Generally, we start to eat less and less protein, and we definitely become a little bit less active. So those two things together definitely increase the rate of sarcopenia from happening. And then also, the secretion of the hormones that are even related to muscle growth also decrease with age, as you can see, such as testosterone and growth hormone. So a lot of kind of things happen as we age that kind of aid with increasing the loss of muscle mass. So that's why it's definitely important to stay active as we age, and definitely making sure we consume enough protein. Because as you can see by this picture, that muscle of the average healthy adult, right? There's adequate amount of muscle in there. There is some fatty tissue, but it looks like a normal, healthy muscle, right? And then as we age and muscles after sarcopenia, as you can see, the legs essentially the same size, but it's definitely smaller muscle. And we know the less muscle mass we have, our metabolism tends to slow down. We're not able to, pick ourselves up. And that's actually what leads to a lot of our injuries too as we age. So it's definitely important to keep our protein up. So after I've been talking about how much protein we actually need, I'm going to break it down a little bit more for you. So the amount of protein needed is actually based on our body weight and the muscle mass, as well as specific goals you may have. So again, I'm going to give you a general guideline, but if you are looking for a more specific amount, I can definitely meet with you one-on-one and we can talk about it, or you can talk about it through email. But general guidelines, typically I advocate at least 0.75 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. So example, what do you do here, right? If I weighed 150 pounds, for example, and I times that by 0.75, right, I would get 112. And if I times it by 0.8, so this would be 150 times 0.8, I would get 120. So if that was my range, right, I would want to aim for 112 to 120 grams per day. So again, you're just timesing that 0.75, 0.8 grams to your body weight. And that's kind of general how much that you should aim for a day. And then next, I wanted to just break down, again, this isn't all your animals, all your protein sources, but it is some of them. So again, other things do have protein in them, but these are kind of the main ones that we usually consume. So that's why I put them on this PowerPoint. But grams of protein in various food items. So 3 ounces of animal protein, whether that be, you know, fish, chicken, your red meat, essentially. So that's about the size of your palm, would be about 3 ounces. That would be about 21 grams, give or take. So maybe not exactly 21, but typically around that range. That's how much protein you're getting there. 1 egg, so again, this would be your whole egg, white and yolk. It's typically about 6 to 7 grams per egg there. 2 ounces of cheese, so general picture here would be about actually 4 cheese cubes, so like 4 dies, if you know what that kind of looks like, would be about 10 to 12 grams. A half cup of beans is about 5 to 8 grams, and then again 8 ounces of milk, and this being cow's milk again, so because your nut alternative milks do contain little amounts of protein, but 8 ounces, so about 1 cup is 8 grams. Half a cup of cottage cheese. Cottage cheese is a great source of protein, would be about 12 to 13 grams. An ounce of nuts, so that's like a small cupful in your hands, would be about 6 to 8 grams, right? And then that's kind of the same as a tablespoon of your peanut butter there. And tuna packet, because I did add that, is 17 to 19 grams, give or take. So typically what I advocate for most of my clients, I typically say aim for about 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. And then our snacks can definitely, I kind of say 10 to 15 grams of protein. You generally kind of think about, hey, I need to consume a protein source every time I eat. You'll generally kind of be around your protein goal. Okay, so always get in the concept of thinking, hey, I need to get at least 20 grams for my meals and 10 grams for my snacks, and that can kind of definitely help you achieve your protein goals. And again, this isn't all your protein sources, but I kind of listed the main ones. Greek yogurt even isn't on here, but that kind of just depends on the brands and how much you have of that protein there too, but that's a great source as well. And again, if you have any further questions about, you know, Caitlin, I'm confused about how to get more protein or what sources, just let me know and we can definitely talk about it. So what should I do from here? So I'm hoping at this point you definitely know the importance of why we need to keep our protein where it needs to be, right? It helps with a lot of important things in our body, including maintaining and keeping that muscle mass, because that's the biggest thing I typically even say too, is if you're trying to lose weight and you're consistently in a caloric deficit and still missing that protein mark, we have a tendency to lose a lot of that muscle mass as well. So definitely try to keep that protein where it needs to be. So moving forward, just general rule, choose a variety of protein sources. So again, experiment with both complete and incomplete protein. So your incomplete, so your plant sources, beans and peas, nuts, soy, and even seafood. So the more variety, kind of the better it is, especially when it comes to providing key nutrients for our body. Choose seafood at least twice a week. So I typically say kind of advocate our healthy fat protein sources, such as tuna and salmon, which are our fatty fishes. They actually provide us with some of our omega-3s. I say definitely incorporate some of those if you're not getting other sources of omega-3s into our diet at least twice a week. We want to choose lean cuts of meat and lean meat and poultry. So I mean, lean cuts would be round or sirloin, and even ground beef that is less than like 93% lean. We definitely want to trim or drain the fat from meat and even remove, ideally, the poultry skin. Plant proteins more often. So plant proteins tend to be lower in saturated fat and typically even high in fiber. So those sources would be our beans and peas, so specifically beans, kidney, pinto, black, white beans, chickpeas, and even your hummus there. And then your soy products, again, which would be tofu, tempeh, and even some of your veggie burgers do have some soy in there. And your nuts and seeds. And then when it comes to cooking, ideally you want to try grilling, roasting, broiling, and baking. So we typically want to kind of avoid the frying part, because these Cooking methods typically don't add all that extra fat. And then definitely check the sodium. So salt is added to many canned foods, definitely our soups, vegetables, beans, and meats. A lot of your frozen entrees have a lot of sodium in them as well. And then many your processed meats, such as your ham, sausage, and hot dogs, can be high in sodium. So definitely just check your labels there. Some even fresh chicken, turkey, and pork are even brined in salt sodium for flavor and tenderness. So again, just kind of keeping an eye out on those. So just to kind of summarize all this up, remember we do need protein to help build proper muscle. The grams are on the previous slide, and remember we do need to aim for 0.75 to 0.8 grams per body weight. And a general rule of thumb, right, we want to aim for 20 to 30 grams per meal and 10 to 15 per snack. So kind of always making sure we're consuming that protein and definitely incorporating many different types for the different nutrients, okay? So that kind of sums up our PowerPoint for today. And again, if you guys have any questions, definitely reach out to me. And I appreciate every single one of you for listening. So thank you, and you guys have a wonderful day.